I think a lot of leaders are afraid to do that because they don't think they're good at it, or they don't want to look foolish, or I need somebody to help me. That's not what your employees want typically. They just want you to be you. You don't have to be a rock star. Just be you, and keep that in mind no matter how high up you go in the organization.
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where we bring you illuminating conversations from impactful leaders in business and our communities. I'm really excited today because we have another Jason joining us, Jason Anthoine.
Yes.
He's a globally recognized leader in internal communications, employee experience, and culture change. He's also the host of the Ridin Shotgun podcast, so check that out when you're done here. And if you're looking to really reach and connect with your employees, this episode is for you. Thanks for joining us today, Jason.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Jason. It's very rare to have two Jasons together, and so I'm glad to be the second half of this.
Well, this is a treat for me, a treat for you, and a treat for the audience. So yeah, I'm excited to get started. But for everyone watching, before we get started, hit like, comment, and share right now so we can bring these game-changing ideas to as many people as possible. And don't forget to subscribe. We've got a lot more interviews with amazing leaders like Jason coming up this year.
Perfect.
Here's where I want to start.
All right, fire away.
You're known for saying every company needs a pirate. What's that all about?
Yeah, well, I used to think that I was unique in that experience, but the more I say that in front of other people, it seems to be true more often than not. And usually what that means for most everyone is that, you're interviewing for a job and they're like, we need you to come in here and kind of shake things up and do things a little differently. You go, great, that's exactly what I love to do. And so you get there and you start doing that. And then like after a little while, somebody will just kind of pull you aside and kind of tap you on the shoulder and say, hey man, you're being disruptive here. And I'm like, well, isn't that what you wanted? I mean, that's you said you needed a pirate, right? Well, I guess we didn't really know what we meant when we said that. And so what I've found is that most companies need pirates, but they don't really like them living on their ships, And so what I've found, for me at least, as a consultant, is that it's much easier to just have your own pirate ship and then sail up next to theirs and swing over and do all the pirate stuff that they need you to do. And then when you're done, swing off and get back on your ship and sail away. Because they need it done. They just, it's hard for them to imagine a pirate living on their ship. And quite frankly, it's been my experience that if you are living on their ship, you're not maybe a pirate much anymore. You're more in their navy. So there's just a lot of advantages, I think, for particularly consultants, but any leader for that matter, on the corporate side, to think of themselves as a pirate and to do all the things the org needs you to do that sometimes they don't have the courage or the experience to maybe do themselves. So I just like to think of myself as a pirate all the time.
Well, you've got permission to come aboard with us anytime.
Oh, great. Thank you. That's so kind.
Do you have your own pirate flag?
No, but you know what? I need one. And it's also funny. This cat showed up about a year ago, a little bitty kitten, like eight weeks old or something. And my son was like, well, we have to keep it. And I was like, well, we'll take it to the vet and get it all fixed up. And then we'll figure out what to do after that, which everybody says, and it never works. So now we have a cat. And because she had been living outside and it's just not right, other animals were stalking her and stuff like that, she ended up losing her right eye. So she's actually the true pirate in this house because she's only got one. She doesn't wear a patch, although she's kind of got dark fur right there. So it kind of looks like that. So I think we both need a flag, but she has definitely got more of a pirate look than I do.
Well, I think you found your model for your pirate flag, and I'm looking forward to seeing that merch up on your website later in the year.
That'd be great. All the side hustles I can come up with for that extra income. I think that'd be great. People want to buy a flag or a photo of the cat, that'd be great.
Fantastic. Okay, enough about the pirate stuff.
All right.
We all hate micromanagement, but you introduced a hidden leadership killer called underleading.
Mm.
Why is that even more dangerous than micromanagement?
I think it's more dangerous because, like in the micromanagement type of scenario, that feels like overleading to the point where it really just sort of managing versus leading. But the underleading concept is related to that, which means I don't I probably don't trust them, or they're not going to do it my way versus any kind of way that would work, even if one that they come up with themselves. And so it feels like it's just an excuse for not to have stronger relationships with your employees. And as a leader, that is like the number one thing that you're there to do is to, translate everything going on in the business for your employees, and then, build relationships with them over time. And not many people like micromanaging, and so the more you do it, the more thin that relationship gets. And so just over time, by default, you might think that you're leading, but you're actually under leading, and it's because you're not actually giving the employees sort of what they want and need.
Yeah, so you gave us some good red flags we can look for, especially in our junior leaders, our new leaders. So how can we in our organizations turn these leaders into powerhouses?
Yeah, I like to think of, these sort of younger leaders as more, you've got established leaders, and then you've got emerging leaders. Everybody, regardless of title or role, they're an emerging leader. You want everybody to be a leader in your organization. And a lot of clients like to talk with me about executive communications and leadership positioning, and how do we want the C-suite to be perceived internally and sometimes externally. And my standard answer is the majority of leadership communications is symbolic. And so demonstrating the behaviors that are sort of leader-led type behaviors and actually sort of doing the thing that you want others to do is way more powerful than just talking about it. Obviously, communicating is incredibly important, but when you are demonstrating those behaviors, you are communicating. And so, to me, the best way to sort of bring these emerging leaders along is to make sure you're established and your existing leaders are demonstrating the qualities that are important for your organization around leadership. And that's the best way to learn. Most people learn that way. Most people learn by observing. So, the more they can observe that, and the more you can do that around them, for them, with them, the more likely they are to exhibit the same behaviors over their career as well.
Yeah, when I look back on my time in the Air Force, that's, in hindsight, that's what I see is the leaders who were spending less time strategically communicating with us, and more time setting the example and developing us as leaders, because leadership is, we want to push it all down to the lowest level possible to make those decisions.
Sure.
That's what I saw, is that's where the organizations were really successful, no matter what the size.
That's right. And particularly, when we were talking about micromanagement, you've hired really great people. They usually already know what to do, but more importantly, are eager to do that. So the more you allow that to happen, I think the better. And there's a lot of organizations that I've worked both for and with who seem to think that leadership is all about consolidating power, but actually it's about distributing it. It's about making sure that everyone else feels comfortable leading, so that if something occurs, they know what the solution is. They can go ahead with the solution without having to come and run to you, or without you having to run to them and say, have you got it? Have you got it? You know what to do? Like, if you consolidate all that, then you end up with people who are a little bit skittish about actually leading. But as soon as you start distributing all that, you'll be surprised. People will pick it up and actually start doing that.
Yeah, that's what I've found. And it's hard, right? Because sometimes you get new leaders, emerging leaders who are a little reluctant to step up because they're not used to that.
Sure.
And moving from individual contributor to leader is one of the toughest career moves.
Absolutely.
How do we help emerging leaders get this transition right?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's whoever their leaders are, giving them permission. I think a lot of times when emerging leaders, get into these roles, there's a lot of fear there about I can't make a mistake, or I can't do something wrong, or I can't make the wrong decision, or whatever. That's okay. So many times in organizations we spend a lot of time in town halls and on the internet, videos and whatever, talking about all the great things that people have done in the organization, and we should do that. But we should also talk about all the failures and the missteps and everything that we learn from those types of things, so that you have the type of culture where it is okay, um, as a leader or even as an individual contributor to try to do the right thing, and for whatever reason it doesn't work right, because that's what you want. That's where innovation comes from. That's where engagement comes from. That's where a lot of all these good things that companies want come from, freeing those people to be able to do those things without necessarily the consequence of fear. So I think just giving them the space to do that, whether they actually succeed or fail at this particular task, the whole point of it is for them to do it themselves, and then over time they'll get better at it.
Yeah, sometimes doing the right thing is hard to do when your boss is telling you not to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And managing up like that can be like it's kind of like a minefield for emerging leaders.
Yes, definitely.
What's the secret to building and mastering this make or break skill for emerging leaders?
Yeah, to me, and I learned this on the, working in agencies, PR agencies and communications agencies during my career. And whenever we got sideways with a client, it was usually because we weren't constantly setting and resetting expectations. They got surprised somehow. It's not even if something got messed up. It was just that they were surprised, they didn't know something, or they were caught off guard, and that, you get sideways like that. And so I think the same thing inside of an organization when you're working. If you're an emerging leader, you're working with your leader, and then you both are trying to manage up and meet all the expectations of the ultimate leader for that area. A lot of that kind of hinges on setting and resetting expectations with the ultimate leader on a continual basis. Like weekly, that's not enough. The world changes by the minute these days. So if you want to make sure no one's getting surprised and no one's feeling nervous about, I told them to do it this way and they're going to do it this other way, constantly set and reset the expectations about where you are and what you're doing and what comes next. And then what that literally is doing is building trust. That is strengthening that trust bond between the emerging leader and the ultimate leader, so that, okay, they said they were going to do it and they did it, and all right, that's one. And then you get 20 in the bank. Now you've got a real strong trust bond there.
Yeah, you and I have been around long enough to know that sometimes just sitting down with someone and talking is the way to build trust and building that relationship.
That's right.
But a lot of organizations, a lot of companies will try to adopt tech to solve their leadership and management problems.
Definitely.
And you've championed the idea of balancing high tech with high touch leadership.
Yeah.
How can we get this balance right without losing connection with our team?
Yeah, I think, a lot of this was happening before the pandemic. Obviously, tech marches on. You can't stop it. And so, but I think particularly during and after the pandemic is when people started really leaning on this tech stuff. And, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. The challenge, though, is that it feels different from an actual, relationship, especially face-to-face types of communication. So there's no way to avoid using high tech platforms for communications and culture change and all the things the organization is trying to do or you're trying to do as a leader. But the more you can also employ high touch things, face to face meetings, or I'm just going to schedule a Zoom call with everybody on my team individually, not to check up on them, but just to check in with them. Like all of that feels differently than how you communicate over tech. And so I think that, balancing that out with just good doses of both high touch and high tech is what employees, I think, are really looking for when it comes to that trust bond and that relationship. And if it's too reliant on high tech, then it just feels, vanilla and antiseptic and kind of cold.
Yeah, I mean, we all know companies who have relied on. We will change the names to protect the
Yes.
guilty, but they rely on their chat apps to get a lot of things done. And I think they're great tools. My biggest problem with chat apps is that there's no communication discipline on chat apps. You know, if I could wave a magic wand and do one thing, I would let everyone who uses a chat app listen to an air traffic control channel.
That's a good idea.
and then everyone would know how you should use these apps instead of how they're used now. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I can't tell you that, particularly when I'm been on the corporate side and leading teams, and particularly with people who are sort of new, certain age groups, without going into too much detail. They're like, I'm like, hey, did you check in with so and see where we are on that thing? Well, I sent them an email and I haven't heard back.
So no.
I was like, well, if you just kind of look around, you can see down the hall, and he's just sitting right there. Why don't you just do a me-mail? Just get up and walk down there and ask the question and come back with your answer. And then it's done in 15 seconds instead of waiting 4 or 5 days. Some of that stuff is sometimes foreign to to certain generations, all generations, but certainly others.
Sometimes the old guys like us get one right now and then, right?
That's right.
So we talked about all the problems with this. Who's one company who's absolutely nailing it, balancing tech and human touch, and what can we learn from them?
Yeah, I think one that comes to mind, in fact, I just read some interesting stats and some information about them this morning, is Spotify. They approach HR and employee engagement and culture a little bit differently. And when I say that, what I mean is that it seems like most organizations think about their relationship with their employees rationally, but most employees think about that same relationship emotionally. And so that brings up high tech and high touch, and it brings up, all the things that we've talked about so far. And they seem to have figured out the right sort of secret sauce that balances. I mean, they are a dead on technology company. That is what they deliver. But it doesn't feel that way when you're working there as an employee, because even though they've got people spread out all over, they've done a really good job of making everything feel human and literally having humans meeting with humans, despite all the tech that they're using to deliver what they need to for their customers, and probably, how they get stuff done inside the house as well. But I think they've done a really good job of putting the human in human resources when it comes to that employee experience.
Everybody check out Spotify. They're doing it right.
In fact, if you go on LinkedIn, there was a really good post today about a book that's been written by several of the people that are in HR there. And they've done, I don't know, some YouTube stuff and some webinars. And anyway, it's easy to search and find. And they're really good examples. You don't have to be in a technology company for any of those examples to apply. You could be, making balls and bats out on an assembly line, and you can learn something about how they think about that emotional connection with their employees.
Well, we'll all check out the book. And I know you've got an idea for a book. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, because my goal is this year I want you to write this book. So tell us all about the book you're thinking about.
Well, maybe we can test it out here on this podcast, and then people can reply and say, that's a good idea, or that's terrible. Then I'll know whether to spend any time on it or not. But the idea is, at what point in your career do you lose touch with reality? And what I mean by that is, let's say, you're fresh out of college or tech school or wherever it is that you've prepared for work, and you show up, and over time, you kind of look up and see everybody that's higher up on the org chart making all these decisions and doing all these things, some of which, if not most of which, makes you scratch your head and think, well, I don't understand why they're deciding things this way or why they're acting like this. If I ever get up there, I'm not going to be like that. And then you get up there, and then you are like that. Why? Why does that happen? What happens between I can see that something different needs to happen to now I can make something different happen, but I don't? I don't know what that Rubik's Cube combination is that makes that happen. But I think it's all tied up in compensation. I think it's tied up in fear. Probably there's some ego that goes along with that. The higher up you get in an organization, people think, oh, wow, it must be great to be the CEO. Like, you're making all this money and you have all this responsibility. Yeah, maybe so to a certain extent, but most CEOs don't last much longer than 18 months. And how many CEO jobs are there going to be, especially if your company kicks you out and because they didn't think you were a good one? So if you're a lower level or a middle level kind of person, you have tons of opportunities to go somewhere else. If you're a CEO and it doesn't work out, like, what do you have? 3 places you could possibly go and work? And so I think, that there's a little bit of fear there and worried about job security and all the other demands that come along with those roles. So I haven't yet figured out what all the facets are, but it feels like it's compensation, fear, ego, and maybe 2 or 3 other ones. And if anybody's got any comments about that, please leave them. Because I would really like to figure out how to explain this in such a way that gives people courage once they get to that, to think, you know what, I used to think this way, I should still think this way. And oh, by the way, if you look around, tech companies, manufacturing companies, consumer product goods, whoever they are, the ones that are doing the best and the leaders that are really truly leading are the ones who still think like they used to, who aren't so constrained by what is. They're always thinking about what if and how could we do something different and better. And that overcomes all that. So some people are able to overcome that. So most aren't. So I don't understand why that is. And hopefully I can solve that this year.
Well, if you want to read that book, tell us in the comments and get your credit card ready to make the pre-order on Amazon so we can encourage Jason to write this book. Do you think, because this is my thought, and I think ego, I think that's all part of it, all the things you talked about. One of the things that I think may be a challenge is developing the ability to shift between strategic thinking and tactical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And in my time in the Air Force, I saw first making that leap from being someone who is used to thinking tactically to just thinking strategically, it can be a really hard leap. And some folks never make that leap. And so they're always, like you said, they're thinking about what is instead of what if. And then some folks really embrace that I'm thinking strategically, but they forget about how things go at the tactical level. They forget about execution.
Yeah.
Just speculating here. What, do you think that may be part of it?
I completely agree that it is. And, I see that a lot with clients who are in manufacturing, for example, and have, blue collar types of cultures and employees working there where somebody has been working on the line doing, job number 38, not 37 and not 39, but job number 38 for years. And then they become the shift supervisor, and then they become the assembly line supervisor, and then they get promoted. And at some point, everybody that they used to be equals with now sees them as, you're too uppity for us. And a lot of that is because it's not that they've forgotten, but they have, quote, forgotten what it was like when they started. And so they get to the point where, they're consumed by spreadsheets and PowerPoints and, all KPIs and dashboards and everything else that, takes up all the time in their day and weekend, that they forget what it was like to do job number 38. And so I think that's the key to it is the further up you go, the more responsibility you get, the more strategic they want you to be, of course, and you want to be, of course. But that doesn't mean it's either or, it's both. You have to be strategic and also remember all the tactical stuff that went into making your strategies now successful. And the more you can continue to empathize and understand and, really sort of have everything correlate with what's literally happening out on the floor, I think that makes you a better strategic leader because you know exactly when you decide to, whatever this piece of strategy is, when you propose that, you know exactly what it's going to take to make that happen because you've done that job before and you are still really tight with the people who are currently doing that job. How could you not be more successful by taking those things into account? And a lot of times people forget or stop doing that or whatever it is. And I think that's a big miss.
Agreed. So everybody watching or listening, your homework is convince Jason to write this book.
Also,
leave us a 5-star review. Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's right. Secretly, you mentioned my podcast at the outset of this. Secretly, that's what the podcast is because I write for a living all day long. I have little patience to write my own stuff, after work and in the morning and on the weekends and stuff. And so I'm too lazy to write a book, but I'm not too lazy to record a bunch of episodes of a podcast and then collect all those up, send them through AI and press the print a book button. And then there's my book. So maybe I could do it that way.
Yeah. If you're an ambitious emerging leader out there watching or listening, go listen to Jason's podcast, get all the transcripts, upload them all into your favorite AI, kick out the draft manuscript, send it to Jason, and maybe he'll be kind enough to give you an author credit on the book.
That'd be great. That'd be absolutely great. We can even do like a book signing party, and you can be
great. I'll be reading this book by March.
We'll see. That's a huge deadline, but got to have one if you're going to try to do it at all.
You're not doing it. Somebody else is doing it. AI's doing it.
That's true. That's even better. They don't know about time, or maybe they do now. Who knows?
Maybe they do now. So we did mention your podcast. It's called Ridin Shotgun, which may be just about the best name I've ever heard for a podcast.
I had some other names for it, but they probably wouldn't pass muster.
Probably not. But tell us all about what you talk about on the podcast.
Yeah, well, the idea is, I've been doing this for 35 years, and I've either been working inside of companies as an employee or a consultant for them. And literally, my role as a communicator typically is to help other people be better and make sure that they're doing the right thing and coaching them and showing them, what good looks like and things like that. So typically, I'm riding shotgun with them my whole career to help them be better at what they're doing. And so my idea for this podcast that I have is, all right, come ride shotgun with me. So now I can tell you all these stories that I've learned by riding shotgun with all of these other leaders over 35 years. And again, because I'm too lazy to write a book, I'm also too lazy to do a really long podcast. So the episodes are about 5 minutes. It's a little bit of a story about something that's happened over my career. And then, here's the result of that and the lesson that you can learn from that. You're in and out of there in 5 minutes. Not a big, huge investment. It's not even time to get on the Peloton or put in one load of laundry. So it's really quick and it's really fast and it's, easy to consume.
Folks, you can't afford not to be listening to Ridin Shotgun. So after you're done here today, finish watching or listening to this.
Yeah.
Then go check out Ridin Shotgun and give Jason some love there. So let's take a break from the serious questions. Let's play a game. Are you up for a game?
I love it. Yeah, let's do that.
All right. This game is called Rapid Response.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to mind.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Now, we don't need one-word answers.
Okay.
Feel free to give us all the details, elaborate as much as you want. We've got nothing but time today, but we want to get the first thing that comes to mind when we ask you the question. Are you ready to start?
I think so. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Jason Anthoine, rapid response round. Your time begins now. Podcast recommendation.
Oh, gosh. I like Seth Godin, and like everybody else, I like mysteries, murder mysteries and unsolved things. Of course, I can't think of any of the titles, but there's like 80 billion of those. There's so many great lessons you can learn about work just listening to, these sort of unsolved mysteries kinds of things. So I like to see things happening in other types of areas and then see how I can apply those to work.
A leadership myth that drives you crazy.
Leadership is connected to proximity. And what I mean by that is, since the pandemic, everybody's like, we got to go work from home for those who could do that. Not everybody has that luxury. And then now lately it's like, okay, we're over all that and everybody has to come back into the office. Why is that? I think the reason why is that it is working from home and then having to bring people back to the office has amplified for companies that their leaders never really were leading to begin with, and now it's even harder because people aren't around them all day long. So instead of thinking, how can we make them better leaders, the thinking is, well, how can we just bring everybody right back in and have them sit around there again? So just because they're close to you, that doesn't make you a better leader. In fact, if they're not near you at all, you have to try even harder to be a good leader. And so it just feels like a crutch to me.
Someone underrated we should all be paying attention to.
I think one of the things that comes to mind are the people who are doing, anybody, probably somebody in your company, who are doing the coolest things with AI and the coolest things with social media. Because if you think about the role of AI and the role of social media outside of the organization, there are tons of fantastic lessons to be learned that you can apply inside the organization. And when you think about employee communications, when people are not at work, they're on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and whatever else it is they're doing. And so when they come into work, they bring those expectations with them. But a lot of times when you walk through the front door, it's not 2024 or 2025 anymore. It feels more like, maybe 2004, because your own tech doesn't match what they're able to experience on a regular basis when they are not at work. And so the best way to overcome that is to understand who's running your social media, how is AI being used outside the organization, and then think about how to do that same stuff inside. So I can't name all those people. There's millions of them, but you know who they are. They're sitting down the hall from you.
First time I think we've heard that answer. Pay attention to the people sitting down the hall from you. I fully concur, 100% agree.
Yeah, whether down the hall is literal or not, maybe figurative, but there's somebody doing that, and they're probably really good at it, and they know things that would be really helpful in a lot of other ways.
What's your go-to song to get pumped up, or your walk-on music?
I think walk-up music is Nazareth, Hair of the Dog. And then I also think getting pumped up, there's really nothing smoother than the Asia album by Steely Dan. I like that. And if I'm driving and I'm not worried about getting a ticket, then it's 70s funk.
Those are some deep cuts, especially for this audience. I will say, since the advent of yacht rock, I have an appreciation for Steely Dan that I didn't have in my younger days. So
it's funny you mentioned yacht rock, because Michael McDonald is kind of the voice for yacht rock. And there's a comedian that my son and I were watching on YouTube, and he was talking about, the cranberry people, they're getting in all the other drinks. There's cran orange, there's cran grape, there's cran raspberry. And I kind of feel the same way about Michael McDonald. Like, he's like the cranberry of yacht rock music, because he's in he's got his own songs, and then he's in everybody else's songs, singing backup and all this other stuff. So yeah, he's the cranberry of yacht rock.
I agree. He's the cranberry of yacht rock music, and then probably a little beyond that. And you know what? I'm here for it. He's a national treasure.
He really is. That baritone is so sweet, and a lot of people don't know that he started out singing backup for Steely Dan first and second album. And so a lot of the songs that everybody likes from back in the day, he's singing background.
All right. So besides Michael McDonald and Steely Dan, who's the biggest influence in your life?
Wow. This is going to sound corny because this is what I do for a living, but the people that influence me the most are the people who are doing whatever job they're doing that I encounter every single day. And so I'm not the kind of person who's just going to go to the grocery store and pick up 2 or 3 items and check out and leave. I'm going to talk to the produce person. I'm going to talk to the cashier. I'm going to talk to whoever's stocking the shelves, because I'm just naturally curious about work and people's relationship with it. And a lot of those people do a lot of really important work, and it's quite thankless. And that's fine. They signed up for that. Every job is different. But every job is also valuable. And so it's people like that, behind the scenes, kind of, quote, blue collar kinds of folks who are just doing that same stuff day in, day out. Those people really influence me and actually inspire me a lot, because, that's just tough work, and they do it, and they do it gladly, and they're actually really good at it.
Agreed. A book everyone should read.
I'm going to turn behind me, all this stuff behind me. Looks like I'm running a yard sale here, or like a 5 and dime shop, but I have some books back here. And one of the ones that I recommend for everybody is called Smart Brevity. So you read Axios News and anything sort of related to that. They are writing in what's called the Smart Brevity style. And that Smart Brevity style is the absolute best way for leaders and organizations to create content that employees want to consume, not necessarily because the content is any better, but because it is very similar to how they consume content when they are not at work. Most organizations are now kind of following that sort of Smart Brevity pattern, where there's a lot of bullets. There's like, here's the thing, here's the detail you want, and then here's what you do with what you just read. And so the more organizations who can start thinking and writing and communicating, sort of using that Smart Brevity style, it makes it easier on the leaders. It's not a heavy lift. It makes it easier on the employees because it's easy to consume and matches what they're doing when they're not at work. And of course, the book itself is written Smart Brevity style, so it's just a fast, quick, easy read. It gets right to the point. And even if you're already pretty good, you'll be even better if you read it.
I just found my next read. What's a new thing you're going to try in 2025?
Oh, wow. Well, my son is a pretty good musician, and I don't know how many guitars he has. It seems like I would know because I'm the finance guy behind his hobby here. And he plays bass and regular guitar and keyboards, and he's drums, and he writes music. He's pretty good at production and lights. That's the whole thing. And so I think what I'm going to try to do is figure out an instrument that I can either go back to that I gave up a long time ago, or something new that I can do. When I was younger, I took piano lessons for 10 years. I can't even play chopsticks at this point. But it feels like a nice little cheap keyboard. I can put it over there on the kitchen counter and just bang away and maybe get a little bit better at that, or mandolin maybe, or harmonica. I don't know. It just feels like he's got that. He got it from somewhere. Maybe there's some in me that I'm not sure about. Maybe I should explore that a little bit. So kind of a long answer for I'm going to try to figure out how to do something musically, and that's just it. It's just a hobby. I'm not going to try to do anything else with it, or be super aggressive about being fantastic in 6 months. Just I'm going to learn how to do one of those. I don't know what yet.
Well, maybe you and your son will come back on the podcast, do a couple yacht rock covers for us, and maybe an original.
That'd be great. I know when he first started, like anybody who's in their mid-teens, it's all punk and metal and hard rock and all that. And then over time, I'll come home, I'll walk in, and he'll be back there playing, and it's Steely Dan or Jimmy Buffett or Elton John. And I'm like, I'm winning, and I didn't even know it.
You didn't even have to try.
Right. Yeah, he resisted it for so long. I tell my team that all the time, too. You have to have a lot of patience while these clients finally come to your conclusion. And it feels like the same thing here. I had to have a lot of patience and listen to a lot of metal and punk and hard rock until he finally came to my conclusion about the value of that kind of music.
Everyone's got to find their own way to Michael McDonald.
All roads lead there, so no sense fighting.
What's your dream vacation spot?
Oh gosh, that's easy. Everybody has a bucket list. I have like a short list, but the thing that's last on the list is Scotland, because when I go there, I'm not coming back. So that's why it's last. I haven't gotten to it yet, because when I'm going to go over there, I'm just not going to come back. It just looks and feels and seems like the kind of place that just speaks to me. And so if I take a vacation there, it'll end up being more than a vacation. It'll end up being where I'm going to be from now on. So not ready to go over there yet, but when I do, I'm not coming back here because I know I'm just going to fall in love with it.
Solid strategy.
Yeah.
A leadership trend flying under the radar.
Oh, that's an interesting question. There's been a couple of companies that we've worked with who, everybody does a town hall. Get together every month or every quarter, and it's in person or it's online or however it is you do it. And it's always the same kind of formula. The leaders are going to get up and tell you what they think, and typically they're going to look in the rearview mirror and talk about what happened, versus spending a whole lot of time looking out the windshield and trying to fix what's going to happen. So what's in the rearview mirror doesn't happen again. So they're all kind of typically the same, but some are now doing what I like to call a reverse town hall, which is the employees present to the leaders. So let's pretend you have 5,000 employees and they're all spread out all over. You pick a location. Here's sort of what we want you to cover in this town hall. You employees come up with the content, the slide, the talk track, same thing that we normally do with the leaders. But the employees get to present and talk about how the month or the quarter went and what we need to be doing to look ahead and to make things better for the next time. And the leaders get to listen to that. So two things happen. One, employees get really scared, but they are so excited about this opportunity. And almost every single time it goes off without a hitch. They learn a lot in doing that, but more importantly, the leaders learn a lot because they don't have any control over what they're going to get up there and talk about other than this loose outline we agreed to. And it is a great way for them to just kind of get a bird's eye view of whether or not employees truly understand what it is that we're doing around here, because now they have to stand up and report about it. And so if they're able to stand up and report about it, that is a really good indication that, yeah, our employees really do know what's going on around here. So whatever it is we're doing seems to be working, and we just need to keep doing that. And if the opposite happens, then that's also helpful, because now you know where the gaps are and what what you need to do to kind of fill those. So I think that's kind of flying under the radar. It's an interesting little trend.
I can't think of a better way to get real data on if our team and our employees are understanding the big picture of what we do here. I love that idea.
Yeah, and there's no risk. Even if you're publicly traded, you can have your quarterly investor call or whatever, and then you can also do a different kind of town hall. There's no law that says you can't do that. So all these companies are always reticent to do that. Oh, what if this gets out to investors? Well, they probably appreciate that you have a great culture, if you ask me.
All right, last one. Favorite sports team or player?
Oh, gosh. That is hard. I live 30 minutes away from the University of Georgia Bulldogs, and I went to college there, and they're going to be, playoffs coming up here pretty soon. So, of course, I like them. But I think maybe my favorite player across any sport is Hank Aaron. He just did a lot for the sport, a lot for humanity. Certainly a lot here, in the Atlanta area and Georgia at large for sure, but just really good without being sort of cocky about it. Helped other people be really good along the way. Had to go through a whole lot of challenges and overcome a lot of obstacles, given his race and the time that he was kind of coming up into baseball. Early to mid 60s, through the 70s and 80s. Just a really great guy, and he did a lot for the Atlanta community and baseball at large. He didn't have to do any of that, but it's not like he sat down and said, all right, I'm going to do these things. He just was himself, and I think that's something that we can all learn from,
Yeah, definitely a trailblazer and a legend. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for playing our game. It's
I don't know how I did. I don't know if there's like a scoreboard and I've gotten a D or an A, but it's fun. And gosh, some of the answers are so hard.
I like to think of it as whose line is it anyway, where the points don't matter and you win nothing. So
that's right. Exactly. I'll take it. Pressure's off in that matter.
How do you handle critics who say culture is just a buzzword? And what proof do you offer to get them to think otherwise?
Well, to a certain extent, they're right. Culture is kind of a buzzword. And like most things, that get productized like that and have a whole industry around making sure that they're right, people start to get a little bit, that's just squirreliness. But the reality is that that's the whole thing holding the organization together. And to me, the best way to help leaders or non-leaders understand the importance of it is to relate the value of the culture inside of the workplace to the value of their relationships and their culture with all of their friends and family when they are not in the workplace. And so if you think about how, most households run, let's pretend for a second, we're going to go to, grandma's place for the holidays. And so We have to start planning for that. We have to get our gifts earlier. We have to wrap them. We have to get hotels along the way and then figure out who gets what bedroom when we get there and all that stuff. And then take that example and put it inside of a company. You can't imagine that you would do that with your family and just get in the car at the last minute and not tell anybody where they're going. Nobody has a chance to prepare and then get there and nobody's what to do when they're there. Companies do that all the time. Here's our strategy. Good luck. Y'all can figure it out, and they spring it on people at the last minute. And so if you're not sure about the value of your culture, then just think about running your own household or your family that way. It would not work. It wouldn't work. And so why would work be any different? And so to me, that's the value of the culture. It's, you have one. A lot of people say, we need to hire you so you can come in here and help us have a culture. Yeah, well, you already have one. And your employees define what that is. In the same way that if you have a brand, you don't define what that is. Your customers define what that is. You might be able to draw a big square around it, but the actual value of that brand is determined by the customers, not the company. And the same thing with cultures. If you have one, you might not like it, but you have one. If you want it to be better, there are things you can do. But whatever it is you have or are going to have, it is truly defined by your employees. It might be shaped by you, just like your brand, but it's truly defined by your employees. And so if it's not where you want it to be, then your employees are ultimately responsible for making that happen. So turn them loose and let them do it.
Yeah, your employees shape a lot of things that not every leader understands they shape. And finally, in the year 2025, people have started to understand the power of influence and influencers. You talk about internal influencers in our organizations. Who are they? What do we need to know about them? And what do we do once we figured out who they are?
That's a really good question. And I think, when people hear the word influencer, they automatically think externally and they think, TikTok and Instagram and Kim Kardashian and people like that. And yes, those are social influencers. But you also have internal influencers in your organization. And they're there. You probably don't know who they are. HR probably doesn't know who they are. The rest of your employees know who they are because they're the ones that are going to them to get that influence. And so the easiest way to think about who these influencers are and what they do, they are the people that your employees go to for the meeting after the meeting. So I just sat through this town hall and I'm not sure what they even talked about. I'm kind of confused about it, but I'm going to go over here and ask Paul, and whatever Paul says, good enough for me. If Paul likes it, I like it. If Paul doesn't like it, I don't like it. So that's who they are. They're the people that people go to for the meeting after the meeting. And in any size organization where you have 10 employees or 100,000 employees, they're about 3% of your workforce. But they have the power to directly influence the other 90% of your organization. They are already doing it. You don't know it, and you don't know who they are. But they're directly influencing 90% of the rest of the organization, as opposed to the leadership team, which in any size organization is about 12% of the workforce. But they can only directly influence 50% of the rest of the organization. So a lot of companies spend a lot of time making sure that the leaders know what's going on so they can tell their employees, and that's absolutely what they need to be doing. However, that overlooks the fact that there's these influencers over here that's a small, group of people who actually have way more influence than the leaders do. And so it's important to understand, A, that they exist, and sort of B, who they are. And it depends on your culture what you do about that. Some cultures get nervous when, these are influencers, but they're not really managers, they're not really leaders, they don't have a title, they're not hypos. Then people get a little bit jealous. Oh, I think I'm an influencer. Well, everybody says you're not. That doesn't mean you're not a good leader. It just means that they don't think of you. Like I go to mom for one thing, but I go to dad for something else. Same thing. Both those relationships are valid and important, but they go to influencers for something different than they do when they go to leaders. And that's not a bad thing. It just is a thing. And so it depends on the culture. You might have the culture where it's like, that won't work. Or you might have the culture that says, hey, these people are influencers. Say hey to them. And it just depends also on the employees, because in some cultures, if they find out that they've been talking to an influencer and now corporate knows who they are, you're like, well, I'm not talking to that person anymore because all along they've been a double knot spy and I didn't know it and I can't trust them anymore. But where it shows up is here's an example. So if you're in an organization and an influencer leaves, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, the people that they have been influencing are 90% more likely to leave, and almost immediately. And I just saw this with a client that we did this work with over the summer, and then in the late fall, they end up having to have some involuntary separations. And there were some influencers who were on the list of the people who weren't going to be staying with the company. And so I asked them to track who we knew that they were influencing to see what happened with those people. And within about a month and a half, the majority of those people voluntarily left on their own because now their influencer wasn't there anymore. So if you think it's not important, it's going to show up in all kinds of ways. You know, turnover, quality, safety, whatever your KPI dashboard is. Behind that are these influencers who are doing a lot of great work that you're not even aware of, but let them keep doing it because it matters. And it's like putting a turbo on everything else you're doing.
You talked about proximity is the illusion of leadership. Mm-hmm. And we mentioned there's a big push in companies to return to office right now. What are your thoughts and what's your advice for companies who are trying to make this decision?
Yeah, I think, like we talked about, it feels like it's rooted in the fact that I don't think it's around productivity. I don't think it's around anything other than control and the illusion of control and the fact that it's covering up the lack of leadership. So for whatever reason, I as a leader don't feel like I'm as connected to my team now that they're not working right around me. So for me to be more effective, they need to be in here all the time. And then that's where the rub is. Is it all the time? Is it some of the time? Who gets to decide what the middle point is? Like, yeah, there's good parts about being in there all the time and some of the time, and even none of the time. So you kind of have to take all that into account, but don't let it be because your leaders aren't strong leaders. And I suspect that's a lot of what it is, which is I don't know how to have a high touch relationship with somebody that I'm only connected to and not with because of these high-tech platforms, and it just takes extra work. So if whatever your normal leadership style is where people are in proximity to you physically, it is 10 times harder when they are not. But that doesn't mean you don't have to do it. That means you have to do it and try even harder than you had to try before. And I think that's what's happening here is that it was too hard for leaders to do, and rather than try to get better at it, they're like, well, let's just go back to what we were doing before, because apparently that was good enough. And I don't know anybody who truly wants to aspire to be good enough. Like, there's always better.
Yeah, there's always better. We've all had failures.
Yeah.
What's the one mistake that turned out to be your biggest breakthrough?
So when I was in college, I went to the University of Georgia. I majored in public relations, which was in the journalism school. And back then there were three majors. There was PR and advertising. There was PR, there was advertising, and then there was radio, TV, film. And those were the three majors. And then news writing, of course. So those were the four majors that were in the journalism school. And when you graduated, over there where the advisors were, there was literally a board on the wall where they would put index cards of these are the jobs that are available. And then they would line them up under your four majors. And then when I was graduating, under PR, there were two jobs. One was to do the employee newsletter for a bank. And the second one was to drive the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile and be sort of a brand ambassador for them. So I applied to both. There was a bunch of people graduating. You can't be picky. So I applied to both. I got selected for both. And then I ended up picking the bank newsletter job. 100% because of the fact I'm from a very small town. Most people there don't go to college. Hardly anybody in my family went to college. And there was no way I could go back and tell people that I finally went to college and graduated. I'm driving a hot dog around. So as it turned out, the fun, cool job I had to say no to so that I could go and work at the bank and do the employee newsletter. And here it is 35 years later, and I'm still doing employee communications. And it's probably a pretty good bet that I would not still be driving a hot dog around. However, as much as I would like to.
I was sitting here through the whole story going, please, please, please let it be the Wienermobile.
I
Please,
know,
please,
I
please let it be
know,
the
I
Wienermobile.
know. Missed opportunities. There's no telling where I would be in the world right now had I taken the other thing, you know?
I would have made a very different choice, and I probably still would be driving that Wienermobile for minimum wage.
I just didn't have the heart to tell them, yeah, I finally made it to college, and, I'm driving a hot dog around. The people there, I don't think just would have had the right kind of understanding of that.
All right. Besides finally driving the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile,
Yeah.
What's your big goal for 2025?
I think I'm going to focus more of my time helping fewer leaders lead. Like a lot of times, clients call and need to come in here and train all these leaders up, and it's 100, 200, 500, however many it is. They just run them through an assembly line, and that's great. I mean, they offer their own training, but there's also really good reasons why you would bring somebody in from the outside, just a different perspective, if nothing else. And so I love that work. But the older I get, the more it feels like instead of trying to think about every leader, I need to start thinking about each leader. So how can I figure out who are the right people in those organizations? Then they might be influencers to really put my arms around and help them become who they probably already are, but are just too scared to be. So that they themselves can then start, like we talked about earlier, can start demonstrating those behaviors, and then other people see that and go, oh, well, that's not so scary. I know how to do that. I can start doing that. To me, that just has a better effect than just trying to run them all through, an assembly line process. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if you're not doing anything now. Anything is better than nothing. But it just feels like the older I get, the tighter I want that sort of coaching and counseling relationship to be, so that I can help make a difference for that person, and then that person can make a difference with a whole lot of other people. So I don't know. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, next year I want to conquer the world. No, next year I want to do less, but have it be better.
Less is more.
Yeah.
You're a pretty easygoing guy. One,
yeah.
one might even say very pirate-like.
Without the long flowing hair, I'll tell you that. That's certainly disappointing.
It's 2025. That can be fixed.
That's right.
How do you stay calm in chaos, and what's your advice for leading under pressure?
Oh, well, we were talking earlier about the Atlanta Braves, and so at a certain point along there, Joe Torre was the manager. He was also with the Yankees and a couple of other organizations, I think. And so he's written.
Yes, he's very hated by me and my family.
And a lot of people, have visceral reactions when you mention almost any sort of sports figure. So, but after that, he did a lot of work in the leadership area, wrote books and, did talks and had training and all that kind of stuff. And so in a couple of his books, he talks about this concept of a role that leaders need to play, which is when you walk into this room, and it's kind of like that scene in Poltergeist when the lady walks upstairs and she opens up the bedroom door and all the toys and stuff are swirling around. I mean, it's just a big swirl and everybody's all up in arms about everything. He said that the most important thing that you can do, especially in situations like that, is to set off calm bombs. And so I feel like that's part of what my job is, because by the time somebody has called me, it's probably gotten way out of hand and they're in a panic. Their boss is in a panic. The whole organization's in a panic. And I can't come in there and be in a panic. I got to come in there and set off these calm bombs so that everybody understands that it took us a while to get in this mess. It's going to take us a little while to get out of it, but we are going to get out of it. So rather than spending all your time panicking, let's spend all of our time figuring out the way out and how we can get there as fast as possible. And so you have to automatically be really calm in those types of situations. And that brings the room down. That brings the organization. It's sort of a soft reset, and they're like, okay, all the adrenaline has kind of gone back to normal now, and we can think clearly, and we can, figure our way out of this thing. But if you're not playing that role and God forbid you're making it worse when you get there, nothing good is going to happen. So part of why they hire you is to come in there and turn that temperature down in a way that they can't. They just can't because they're in it.
Good advice in every situation. So for every up-and-coming leader right now, what's the single most important lesson they need to learn to really connect with their team?
I would say from a lesson standpoint, it's important to remember that communication is a leadership responsibility and not a department down the hall. Even small organizations have somebody, even if it's just part-time thing that they do on the side, who is, quote, responsible for communications. And so I think, which is helpful, organizations need that. But I think a lot of times leaders use that as an excuse to outsource that part of their leadership. Oh, well, I don't have to be good at that. I'll just get those people to do it. Oh, I don't need to meet with the team. Somebody will write me something and I can have some talking points. All of which is fine, but it's not either or. And so it's incredibly important for you to continue to understand that this communication thing isn't just what some people are doing down the hall. It's what you have to do as a leader. And you don't even really have to be good at it. You just have to be trying to be good at it, because your employees will give you a pass every single time. They know what good is. They also know what bad is. But they also know what trying is. So you don't have to be the best. You're probably not the worst either, even if you think you're a terrible writer. It's your writing as good as it's going to be, and there's nothing wrong with that. What they want to see is that you're trying. And so just trying will get you as many bonus points as being really good at it. And so I think a lot of leaders are afraid to do that because they don't think they're good at it, or they don't want to look foolish, or, I need somebody to help me. That's not what your employees want typically. They just want you to be you. You don't have to be a rock star. Just be you, and keep that in mind no matter how high up you go in the organization. Your job is to translate what's happening in this business for employees who don't have the same view that you do. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is communicate, whether it's high tech or high touch, in person, web, video, internet, doesn't matter. You're the leader. Your job is to communicate. And we as an industry really wouldn't have these jobs if leaders were doing that themselves on a regular basis. We could help them be better, but we certainly wouldn't be doing it for them, which is a lot of what happens now, which is exactly what it feels like when employees are consuming that stuff. Oh, you didn't write this. Somebody else did that for you. That's not what you want.
Well, that's a great place to leave it. Jason, I can't say enough about how fantastic this has been.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
Where can everyone find you and your podcast so they can thank you for joining us today?
Yeah, so the podcast, which I appreciate you mentioning several times, it's where you probably get this podcast, Apple and Spotify and all those places. Ridin Shotgun with Jason Anthoine. You can go to my website, which is jasonanthoine.com. There's all kinds of insights and other things on there that might be helpful for you, that you don't have to pay me for. I put stuff on there for a reason. I want you to be good, whether you ever pay me or not. And then same thing on LinkedIn. Everybody's on LinkedIn, and so I just say stuff on there that sometimes just mostly to stir the pot and get people thinking a little bit differently. So if anything I've said today kind of resonates with you, then there's a big old buffet of that over there on LinkedIn that you can consume whenever you want to. And please connect. That'd be great. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, there's really great stuff on the website. So everybody go check it out. Everyone reach out to Jason and thank him for joining us. I want to express my gratitude for you being on the show today. To everyone watching, I want to thank you as well. If you found this conversation valuable, go ahead and share it with someone who can use it. Leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe so you get all of our interviews coming in the future. And like I mentioned before, if you liked this, please leave us that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. It really helps grow the podcast and we get out to more folks. So we've got lots more amazing leaders coming your way in the coming weeks. Keep watching, keep developing your leader's mindset. Onward and upward.